Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a snapshot update video for Minecraft Snapshot 16w38a. This snapshot was actually released last week, but I've been away from Minecon, so this is a bit of a late update. If you were looking for a snapshot update video for 16w39a, the one with all of the juicy features revealed at Minecon, then do not despair, that video will be released just after this one. So if you already know everything there is to know about this one, then feel free to go ahead and click on the next video on my channel or in the Minecraft news playlist, and you'll get right to the new features. This snapshot came out before the reveal at Minecon, but it still has some very important changes. That's why they put this one out before Minecon. We're actually going to start with a game rule change. That is normally stuff that command blockers, map makers, server owners and people like that care about, but this one is pretty important for normal players as well. A new rule called maxEntityCramming has been added. That will suffocate mobs and players if they are touching more than a certain number of mobs and players. You can put it to 0 to disable it, but the default is 24. That means that if there is 25 or more entities in the same spot, they will suffocate. That is 3 hearts of damage per damage tick, and this is damage that ignores any armor. It's just straight up damage applied to your health. If you get killed by this, it is exactly as if you suffocated. Your death message will be "player suffocated in a wall." So let's move on from that to another new game rule. There's a frequently requested game rule that was added to this snapshot. It is called doWeatherCycle, and if you set it to false, whatever weather there is will keep being the weather there is. Some more command changes. The keyless syntax for coordinate and range arguments in target selectors has been removed. You used to be able to do a selector like at a 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would mean that your x, y, and z coordinates was 1, 2, and 3, and your radius was 4. That is no longer the case. You now have to specify x equals, y equals, and so on. There's a number of bug fixes related to commands and map making as well. If you had a written book without an author tag, the game would crash if you tried to copy it in a crafting table. Small armor stands hitboxes were too high, and small armor stands and small zombies would display items differently than normal sized ones. That means that anybody who's used small armor stands primarily to hold and display mini versions of blocks and items probably need to adjust that setup in your maps. Marker armor stands sometimes didn't render, and that's also fixed. If you set the game rule "do mob loot" to false, then saddled a pig and killed it, you wouldn't get the saddle back. That's also fixed. Villagers didn't have any loot tables. This is different from other mobs that also don't drop any loot, like bat. Bats used to have loot tables already, and now villagers do too. They still don't drop any loot, but this means that in your custom setup you can make them drop whatever loot you want them to drop. There's also some problems with resource pack in that lit furnace still had an item model and there was a duplicate model for an old wooden slab. Finally, if you're using structure blocks and withers, the withers could sometimes break those structure blocks, and that has now been fixed. Let's move on and talk a little bit about items. Potions without tags now default to an uncraftable potion. It has no glint anymore and is kind of purple in color. A couple of fixes to shields. There used to be a bug way back where the base color of the shield would be changed when the shield was damaged and then repaired. That bug was back in the previous snapshot and has now been fixed again. You are able to place redstone doors and other things on 2 layers of snow that were 7 deep rather than 8. That meant that whatever you placed on top of them would float in the air somewhat. That is now fixed to require 8 full layers of snow, which looks the same as a full block of snow. If you fished and you got an ink sack, after the introduction of loot tables, that was now much more common and fished up in a stack of 1 instead of in a stack of 10, and that has now been fixed to work the same way it did before loot tables were introduced. Water bottles, if you got them from a cauldron or in the creative inventory, had an NBT tag saying that they were a plain water bottle. However, if you just filled it from a source block of water, they didn't get the tag properly, which meant that in a command block contraption you couldn't test for those kinds of bottles, and that has now been fixed. And also somewhat related to water, boats could collide with any entity, including non-living ones like arrows or paintings or lingering potions. Now they've been changed to only collide with living things. Let's move on to mobs. If you held a saddle and attacked an unsaddled pig, then you would suddenly saddle the pig. And if you got into the saddle of a mule, you were floating a little bit above the saddle instead of sitting on top of it. Squids could spawn in lava. They probably didn't have a good time there, so that's no longer the case. And if you killed a guardian with lava, you didn't get cooked fish, you just got fish. Chickens would still make the stepping sound, even though they were swimming. And silverfish did more damage on easy difficulty than they do on normal difficulty. That is now corrected. Mushrooms would path on grass instead of mycelium, which meant that they didn't spawn as intended. There's also a bunch of fixes for items dropped by or used by mobs. If you put wings onto an entity or a mob, they wouldn't render, and now they do. There's also a whole load of fixes for drops. Probably the most interesting one being that killing rabbits with looting didn't have any actual looting effects, and now it does, and the durability of all golden swords dropped by zombie pigmen were exactly the same. They weren't randomized at all, and now they are. Finally, there's a few UI related changes, most important of which, chat messages can now be 256 characters long, which is up from the previous value of 100 characters long. And that'll be all from this snapshot review. This past weekend, the main features for Minecraft 1.11 were revealed, and they are all included in the next snapshot, 16w38a. So if you're interested in that, and if you're interested in trying this out, then head on over to the next video in the Minecraft news playlist, and you'll find out all the exciting new stuff that is coming in Minecraft 1.11. This is slicedlime, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.